Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, known as GHF, will suspend all aid distribution on Wednesday as it urges the Israeli military to take greater steps in safeguarding civilians beyond the perimeter of its food distribution sites. This decision comes after dozens of Palestinians seeking aid were killed in an incident near one of its centres. The GHF stated that it has requested the Israeli military to help guide civilian foot traffic near aid locations to reduce confusion and potential escalation. An Israeli military spokesperson, however, warned civilians against moving in areas surrounding the aid distribution zones on Wednesday, labelling them as combat zones. The Israeli army said it had opened fire on what it perceived as a threat near a GHF food centre. Additionally, the IDF has said that it is investigating the incident. Let's take a listen.
מוקדם יותר היום, כוחות צה"ל ביצעו ירי הרחקה כחצי קילומטר ממתחם החלוקה לעבר חשודים שהתקרבו לעברם באופן שסיכן את ביטחונם, את ביטחון הלוחמים. האירוע מתוחקר וגם פה נגיע לחקר האמת. אנחנו לא מונעים הגעה של תושבי עזה למתחמי חלוקת הסיוע. ההפך הוא הנכון. אנחנו מאפשרים. חמאס הוא זה שמונע.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is set to vote on a draft resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of hostages and large-scale unrestricted humanitarian access throughout the territory. In Washington, the White House said it is reviewing the veracity of reports that Israeli forces opened fire on civilians at an aid distribution centre. Let's listen in to what the White House press secretary had to say.
Is this administration aware of these? And I mean, what is being done to address this situation?
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them because, unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak.
Meanwhile, the GHF, which has operated in Gaza for just over a week, continues to face heavy criticism from the United Nations and multiple humanitarian groups who accuse it of undermining neutrality and militarizing the aid process. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also condemned the deaths of Palestinians seeking food as unacceptable, adding that the continuing loss of civilian life in Gaza was unthinkable. Let's have a listen to the spokesperson for the UN.
I can tell you that once again we are witnessing unthinkable loss of life in Gaza. The Secretary General condemns the loss of lives and injuries of Palestinians seeking aid in Gaza. It is unacceptable. Civilians are risking and in several instances losing their lives just trying to get food. Palestinians have the fundamental right to adequate food and to be free from hunger. The Secretary General continues to call for an immediate and independent investigation into these events and for the perpetrators to be held to account.
The war in Gaza erupted in October 2023 after Hamas attacked Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking around 250 hostages. Since then, Israel's military campaign has reportedly killed over 54,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health authorities. Well, joining us to discuss all of the updates in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict is Ross Feingold, a political analyst who is joining us from Taipei. Ross, as always, thank you ever so much for being here. It seems that Israel are now acknowledging that there have been civilian deaths surrounding aid centres, this one of multiple now instances that have been reported from within Gaza. What pressure do you think needs to be placed on Israel to make sure that this isn't repeated?
Certainly, Israel is responsive to pressure from countries that typically are friendly to Israel, like the Western European countries. We have to see if the United States is going to criticize Israel. That's probably unlikely. But at the same time, Israel is saying that we did open a safe corridor for civilians to queue up to receive aid, and a lot of the civilians strayed from the safe corridor, leading to fire from Israeli troops. So, as is often the case in a war zone, there are two sides to the story. Israel says they're going to do an investigation, although frankly they rarely discipline their troops for these kinds of incidents. But it is possible that civilians, given the large volume of people trying to queue up for the food aid, they did stray from the safe corridor, wound up in combat zones, and we have to keep in mind that this is a combat zone. There are ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas.
Yes, Ross, given the current split between world leaders and humanitarian bodies, as well as organisations like the UN, in terms of Israel and their role in the ongoing humanitarian situation in Gaza, do you think that Israel labelling areas around an aid centre as a combat zone is a beneficial thing for them to do amid heightened scrutiny on the world stage?
Certainly from a public relations standpoint, it's not going to help Israel win any friends from among its critics. But we have to also understand the reality that this is a combat zone. Hamas has not been defeated. They still retain the ability to attack the Israeli military. So many parts of Gaza, including areas near the food distribution locations, are still an active combat zone. And Israel repeatedly makes that point when they are criticized. And they say that civilians need to stay within the designated corridor in order to queue up for the food aid distribution. So there's always going to be an element of he said, she said in these situations, and we see Israel having to confront that. But the criticism from European countries as well as countries in the Middle East, that's certainly going to continue.
Yes, Ross, and looking at that criticism and pressure being placed on the current situation, both on Israel and Hamas, given the humanitarian situation in Gaza, how significant is this UN Security Council meeting? Do you think it will actually see any difference in the ongoing trajectory of both Hamas and Israel?
That's probably unlikely, and if there is a resolution that comes up for a vote, it's likely the United States will veto it, so it wouldn't even pass the Security Council. But ultimately, there's a ceasefire proposal on the table. Israel has endorsed it, and Hamas has not. Hamas wants Israel to commit to a full withdrawal, which Israel is not willing to do. Israel is willing to commit to a fixed number of days ceasefire during which aid can resume, but hostages have to be released from or by Hamas. And it's Hamas that's not agreeing to the ceasefire. And as long as Hamas doesn't agree to the ceasefire, then it's going to be difficult to bring in food aid for the civilians.
Yes, absolutely, Ross. You will be staying with us.